After an offseason with multiple high-profile additions to this Colts team, is it realistic to see them making the playoffs or taking a big step this year? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of HorseshoeHuddle.com. My partner in crime, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed Crocs on the ground for the site. Today, we are diving into the best case scenarios, the worst case scenarios, and the realistic scenarios for the Colts this upcoming season. This is a pretty broad topic, guys, so we are going to rush through a couple of things in each segment, but this is more of the intro to broader topics that we're going to cover throughout the course of this offseason, especially when talking about what is realistic for this Colts team and how this season could kind of go awry for the Colts in 2025. But Jake, we like to be positive on this show. We want to be positive on this show. So we're going to kick off this overview with the best case scenario for the Colts. Now, we're going to keep this relatively realistic. So we're not going to say like best case scenario is Richardson becomes the greatest quarterback to ever play the game or anything like that. But I think the one thing we can really start off with in best case scenario for the Colts is Anthony Richardson stays healthy for 17 games, or heck, I will take 14 games at this point from him. But Anthony Richardson stays healthy. He develops a little bit in terms of just finding the check down and getting the ball out of his hands. And maybe he scrambles a little bit more because he did struggle throwing on the move last season. So I think when we're talking about like best case scenario for the Colts, one, it's Richardson starting every game, staying healthy for every game, but also taking some steps that we just really haven't seen in his 2 years with the team already.
Yeah, I think any best case scenario involving the Colts all circles back to Anthony Richardson and what's going on with him, really, because it's kind of also a point of pause for them where you don't know what your future looks like until you know whether or not he's included in it. So first and foremost, he's got to beat Daniel Jones for QB1. I mean, even if he doesn't and then has to come in during the season and like rescue things and looks good, I still think that's kind of discouraging that he wasn't able to beat him off the jump. So Anthony wins QB1, plays at a high level, and starts to look like the player that they drafted him to be. Now, that doesn't mean rushing for like 1,000 yards and throwing for 30 touchdowns and all that. Like, we are trying to keep it reasonable. We're trying to take maybe a little more than baby steps here. But like you mentioned, finding the short option a little bit more often. When it comes to scrambling, we know his eyes are always downfield and he wants the big play. He wants to go to A.D. Mitchell and out Pierce deep. But, dude, you're the best athlete on the field at all times. Even if it's a 3-yard scramble and you go out of bounds, that's cool. It's better than a sack or no gain loss, whatever. So I really want to see them unleash what he's got. At some point, he has been hurt a lot, but that's just the NFL. If you get hurt, you get hurt. I would like to see him run a bit more often, like you mentioned, even if it's just his decision. Like, turn, what is that rollout? Turn it into a scramble. Yeah. It's just time, I think, and they did start to get into that a little bit last year. So in the final 5 games of the season after he came back from being benched, he carried the ball 9 times a game for 51 yards and averaged a touchdown every game. You extrapolate that over 17 games, and it's 874 yards. It's 17 touchdowns, which is Jalen Hurts-ish, probably too high. But so I think that would be part of kind of smoothing out the rough edges and bringing a little more consistency to the offense. Is just the Colts have something that the defense doesn't, and that is this wild X factor running the ball. And that doesn't even include Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, he just needs to stay healthy. Like, honestly, I don't even need him to be average this season. He can be below average.
That's just
this
so,
season. Like,
I mean, there was progress, but it's just so,
just get up to below average and don't miss a chunk of the season. And I will call that a win of a season for him, even if it doesn't lead to him being the Colts quarterback in 2026. Like, he just personally needs that. Like, just stay healthy for one season. And
Yeah.
maybe that's not even realistic at this point to expect that out of him, but that would obviously be the best case scenario for the Colts and for him going forward. Looking at other parts of this team, I think the next big topic here is just the Colts gambles paying off. And by gambles, I really mean gambling with Jalen Carlisle as a starting linebacker, Matt Gonsalves as the right guard, most likely this upcoming season. And then you could even say like Laiatu Latu being like the bona fide number one edge rusher on this team. I think those are the Colts' three biggest gambles they're making going into this season. You could argue maybe cornerback too with like Jalen Jones or Justin Wally, whoever's going to start out there. But I think those are the big three ones. And if Gonsalves can be 80% of what Will Fries was this past season, 75% of what Will Fries was, that's a great gamble that the Colts did, and it would pay off. If Carlisle can just be 50% of what Bobby Okereke was in his final season with the Colts, we're talking about a massive payoff on that gamble. And then Latu, if he can just take a little bit of a step forward, then I think that one's paying off. So I think, the Colts did a lot to shore up some of their deficiencies this offseason, but those are their three biggest gambles. And I think if they can just take some feasible steps forward, then this Colts team is going to be much better for it.
Yeah, I would throw Travarius Ward and Cameron Bynum performing reasonably well on there also. The bold moves and investments they made, if they largely pan out well, I think obviously that bodes really well for them. And then, specifically with Gonsalves and the offensive line, they haven't quite done as much of the offensive line as we thought they were going to. But if that offensive line, a new look group, holds up, with two new starters on it, that keeps the run game going strong, which obviously helps the quarterback. It helps keep pressure out of the quarterback's face. So that really helps everywhere. The Latu and Gonsalves lump into this as well, and Carlisle, but getting those second year guys to all take a leap forward, which includes AD Mitchell, because right now with AD Mitchell, you're getting it's almost a detriment for him to be on the field. So you get him back up to where him being on the field is a positive thing for the Colts. I'm not even saying he has to be some big time playmaker, but some of the highlight plays that he made, which you showed recently on Horseshoe Huddle, just some of those glimpses that he showed you, if he can do that on a more consistent basis, and it's a little more positive than negative for him, I think that's huge for the passing game for the Colts. So they have made some pretty large investments on these second year guys, like these young guys. If they all move forward, then you're looking at a really good young core that I think is probably going to turn some heads in the NFL, looking at the Colts as one of these teams, especially Richardson, where you're like, oh, they have a lot of good young players that sets them up for the future.
Yeah, a lot of what if there. There's one more thing I really want to touch on, though, before we get out of this first segment of positivity, is just the defense taking a step forward and establishing an identity. I think when you put that in the notes here, Jake, I think that was such a great word for it, because under Gus Bradley, a lot of what their defense was trying to do was just survive. A lot of it felt like survive, even against bad offenses. Mm-hmm. It felt like a lot of it was keep everything in front, make your tackles, make them make the mistakes. And even if we give up 400 yards in this game, as long as we give up 10 points, we're fine. And I just don't think that's a feasible way to impose your will as a defense in the NFL. I think if you don't have the talent, sure, that's what you have to do to survive. But this Colts defense going into the season has the talent. They have Buckner, they have Stewart, they have Franklin, they have Charvarius Ward, they have Cameron Bynum. They brought in some more young players too. There's no excuse this year for the defense. So I'm not saying they need to be a top 10 unit, but if they can be a top 20 unit that suffocates bad quarterbacks and puts up a fight against good quarterbacks, that's something. That's an identity. That's a team that can actually do something and strike some fear in opponents, rather than, you're just always fighting to survive out there, So I really want to see some kind of identity on this defense, which would lead to the last point too of this team needs to make the playoffs this year. And obviously that's going to start with Richardson and the defense. But overall, I do want to see more of an identity with this defense next season and just them establish something to build on going forward.
Yeah, that defense dictated nothing of its own last year. Like you mentioned, it was all based on what the offense was going to throw at them and just trying to survive to the end of the fourth quarter. So that's a great way to put it. I mean, being creative and putting your, Lou Anarumo's own handprints on a game plan, I think would be huge. And like you mentioned with the playoffs, if most of these things that we mentioned check off, dare I say, playoffs might be coming. I mean, they
They
certainly
need to make it this year.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I can't really come out here and say that like jobs are on the line because look, Ballard's in year 20 at this point. Like Ballard's been with the Colts longer than I've been alive at this point, I think. But like it feels like jobs should be on the line if they don't make the playoffs this year. They are in a big playoff drought right now. They haven't won the division in the entirety of the Chris Ballard era. Like they need to make the playoffs this season. There's no excuse. You're going into year 3 of the young quarterback you drafted in the top 10. You spent all this money in free agency. You got to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, guys. So coming up, we've seen very little best case scenarios in recent years. We've seen a lot of disaster scenarios. So let's talk about what a disaster looks like in 2025. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. And if you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you can get multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business daily. All right, so we mentioned all best case scenarios really begin and end with Anthony Richardson, and that's kind of what the worst case scenario looks like as well. So worst case scenario, Zach, you could start with it just being that Anthony doesn't win the quarterback job, that it's Daniel Jones. And then in that instance, you kind of know you have zero quarterback for 2026, because even if Daniel Jones plays well, it's probably not your guy for any sort of long-term solution. So you find yourself on the quarterback carousel once again. And if your quarterback spot stinks, the rest of your offense probably does as well, leading to the rest of the team doing it. We've seen that movie before, just recently, actually. So yeah, it comes back to Anthony doesn't smooth out those rough edges, because he will always have those brilliant flashes, but he could also have those super low moments, which could even be as simple as getting hurt. If he gets hurt for 4 or 5 games plus, that's really bad. That's enough from the quarterback position to really question whether or not you want to move forward with him. And that's even if he does perform well next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest worst case scenario is Richardson losing that QB1 job, like you mentioned, in the offseason. Now, it's not technically the worst case scenario yet, because Daniel Jones could come out and have some Baker Mayfield level resurgence. I don't really think I would count on that happening. I do think it's more realistic that he just looks like Daniel Jones. But again, you can't count that out. But yeah, it would be terrible for Richardson's prospects with the Indianapolis Colts. And because again, obviously the best case scenario is him being the guy this year. So yeah, I think him losing out that QB1 job, or even him winning that QB1 job and then suffering another big injury. Because again, what would you do with him in that scenario where through 3 seasons, you've had 5 major injuries with him? Even if it's say he misses a month and a half with an injury this season, which
that's too much.
Everything that we've seen from him, though, says that that's probably going to happen at this point. I just don't know. Even if he plays well, around that, it's what can you really do with that? So there are a lot of question marks around Anthony Richardson. I think aside from just the injury concerns and aside from, the potential QB competition in the offseason, is just him not taking those steps that we need him to take. His play, I hate using this word because it was such a word I used for Carson Wentz back in the day, but volatile in a sense where it's you will get these really good moments of him just making a legit quarterback play, and then one bad play would lead to 5 bad plays in a row, and it would just spiral and spiral. Like we saw in the Detroit Lions game last year, he came out and played some fantastic football early in the game, But there were penalties that took away some of the big plays. There were drops from his receivers that took away big plays. And then that fourth quarter came around and he just was not playing good football because it kind of spiraled on him. So you want to see the poise, you want to see the growth, you want to see him take the check down, and you want to see him be a little bit better, like under pressure and on the move. And I think he realistically can get there. I still believe in his talent. I still believe in what he can be. But in the NFL, the NFL stands for not for long. And these teams can't wait forever. I know Ballard keeps going on this tour about like, nobody lets these quarterbacks develop. But like, realistically, you guys brought in Daniel Jones to compete for the quarterback one job. Like, clearly you're not waiting for it to develop either. Like, he needs to take that step this year. It really is kind of the last chance for him. I'm really hoping that he can put it together, stay healthy, and take those logical steps. But the worst case scenario for the Colts, and especially for him, is we see much of the same that we saw the last 2 years in terms of health and overall sporadic play. So, yeah, when we're talking about the quarterback position, there's a lot of ways this could go awry because all the info we have so far has been it going awry with Anthony Richardson. I'm still a believer. I still think he can be a good quarterback in the NFL and even with the Colts, but he's got to show it this year because teams are not going to wait 3+ seasons for a guy to show more than just flashes.
Yeah, I mean, luckily the good news is he's got this normal offseason. Last year was weird. I mean, just the clear regression that we saw, which does not often happen. There's a sophomore slump, and then there's looking like kind of a totally different player, which unexpected, but we'll see. Again, all roads lead back to him. Another worst case scenario is that some of these bets that the Colts made that we mentioned in that first segment don't pan out. If an AD Mitchell doesn't pan out, that's not really a big deal. But like if Laiatu Latu and Jalen Carlies are just guys, they're just okay and don't really take a next step, that's not going to be good. Right. Because Carlies, that's a guy who spent half the year injured last year, which he doesn't have a history of that, but we've seen history change itself when a guy gets to the Colts. So if stuff happens to these guys or they're just not performing well, the Colts have really kind of put a lot of eggs in those baskets for those guys to take the next step. Matt Gonzalez, obviously, as well, because they really don't have a great right guard option right now. I feel like they left the draft saying, okay, well, at least we have Matt Gonzalez that can play right guard. And, I mean, if there's a weak link on the line, it's not always easily masked. So, yeah, these young guys, and again, we'll throw Ward and Bynum in there too. Bynum, good player, obviously, but if he gets hurt or just isn't playing at that level, they didn't do anything else at safety. Luckily, at cornerback, they could probably absorb that if Travarius Ward doesn't rebound from last year. But at the same time, they gave him a lot of money. So there's a lot of ways some of these things can kind of bite them.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm really concerned with that I see as a realistic avenue for this Colts team to underperform this next season is I don't think they're a very deep football team at a lot of positions.
No.
If there were an injury to happen to Jonathan Taylor, I think Giddens is a fine player, but I don't think he's going to come close to that production, which I know is the case for a lot of teams. But let me go through multiple positions to make my point here. If Taylor goes down, you lose a big part of your offense. If Tyler Warren goes down, you're stuck to the Drew Ogletree and all those other tight ends that we've been complaining all season about. You look at the offensive line. If any of the starters go down, at tackle, you're putting in a 4th-round rookie to start on the outside. On the interior, if a guy goes down, you're putting in Danny Pinter or Dalton Tucker, I think are your guys there. How comfortable do you feel putting those guys out there for a month at a time? We go over to defense here. One of those safeties goes down. Rodney Thomas is starting. If one of the linebackers go down, it's Segu Alubi. It's Cam McGrone starting for a majority of the season. I'm not saying that your backups need to be on the same level as your starters, but we're talking about some massive, massive drop-offs with this Colts team, with a team that historically has been injured quite a bit in the last couple of seasons. So I am concerned about the depth of this team. I think there are some guys who could surprise and turn this depth problem into a good thing for the team, that they have good depth players. But as of right now, you're looking at it on paper, I'm not really looking at this depth and saying this is a deep football team that can survive multiple injuries. And the Colts have not traditionally stayed healthy. So I think that's one very realistic route that could affect the Colts this season and turn this, I think on paper they're an 8 to 10 win team right now. Like they've been that the last couple of years, and I think they got better this offseason. But if some of these injuries pile up, I could see them bottoming out to like a 4 to 6 win team for sure.
Which obviously in a perfect world would mean wholesale changes are needed, but that's what we thought last year too. One little underrated one I'll throw in there real quick. What they've done at kicker, that could bite them as a worst case scenario. We know that kicking can cost you a game in critical moments. So Matt Gay, I'm not going to argue that maybe a change could have been needed. I mean, you could not rely on him outside of 50 anymore. And inside of 50, Shane's probably going to be going for it on fourth down. So where they really need a kicker to go, Gay had become really unpredictable. So you've got Spencer Schrader in there who you like what he did for 3 different teams last year. And then Maddox Trujillo coming in as a UDFA. We'll see. 72% kicker in college. Not great. Significantly worse than what Matt Gay was, actually. But yeah, I mean, you better hope these gambles pay off. I know you don't like to kick field goals very often, but that's going to put more of a spotlight on the kicker in this scenario. They better be able to hit from 50 plus. So that's that, guys. Coming up next, taking all these things into account, what needs to happen for the Colts 2025 season to be considered a success? All right, Zach. So when I think successful season for the Colts, obviously you want to make the playoffs. That's paramount. But weird things do happen in the NFL, and sometimes good teams they can't punch that ticket. Like things can always happen in week 18. But for me, I think the Colts have to be at least competing for a spot in week 18. They can't be already eliminated going in the final game of the season. They can miss the playoffs if they're competing in week 18 and the arrow is clearly up. Just because there's so many weird things that can happen outside of their control. You just never know. Like the AFC could be freaky. The AFC South could be freaky, and they could miss the playoffs going 9-8 or 10-7. You just don't know how that looks. But I need to feel comfortable that the arrow is pointing up, and I would love a little clarity at the quarterback position, like either good or bad. You need to move on from the quarterback, or you're somewhat confident in what Anthony is going to provide you in 2026. Hell, maybe Daniel Jones goes Baker Mayfield, like you mentioned. So, I mean, yeah, that's about the scenarios in which I would feel comfortable at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too just binary with this when it comes to the results for the Colts upcoming season, but so much of it, again, just like the last 2 seasons, comes down to just what Anthony Richardson looks like and what we feel about him come week 18. Because we were saying last season where it's like, look, once the benching happened and he got reinserted as a starter, a lot of what my takes were on him down the stretch was, look, if he can finish the season finishing strong, closing out the year good, I can feel comfortable going into next season. The biggest thing is just take those steps and don't get hurt. And he was kind of taking the steps, but then the injury popped up again, which is why I'm a little bit pessimistic on a guy that I've had a lot of faith in since his draft day, because at this point, we've just seen too many injuries and too many inconsistencies. So really, again, it kind of just leans into that where it's like, I need to see this guy stay healthy. I need to see him be a bit more consistent. Like, I'm not saying he needs to be a top 10 quarterback this season. I really don't care about that. Like, he can be the 25th best quarterback in football this season. I don't care about where he finishes. Stay healthy, show progress, and it's a good season for me. And that way I can feel somewhat confident about this, 22, 23-year-old quarterback? Like, I can feel something about him going forward. But if we see injuries pop up again, if we see the same old inconsistencies and the lack of progress, then this is a failure of a season for the Colts and for him, because then it's not working out with this top 5 pick that you spent at quarterback. It's already not looking great right now, but he has a way to rectify it this year by, again, staying healthy and having a good off season of work and carrying that into the season and showing that progress. So I'm not out on him. I'm really not out on him. I'm not saying that it's over for him, but like, for this season to be a success for him and for the Colts, he's got to stay on the field. Like, he's just got to stay on the field, and he's got to show something that makes the Colts want to keep him around for the next season, because the bringing in of Daniel Jones and openly making this a quarterback competition is saying that, like, he's on the hot seat. So, like, for this team to be successful this season, like, he just needs to be on the field and be productive. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that's kind of with or without the playoffs. I'll shift to Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard as well. I'm not necessarily of the thinking that they have to be tied to Anthony. Like if Anthony fails, that doesn't necessarily have to mean it's on Shane and Chris and heads have to roll, because, what we saw from Shane in 2023, Anthony went out after 4 starts for him. And we had good feelings about Shane at the end of the year. Like, look what he did with Gardner Minshew. Like, very limited player, and he pretty much just juiced the entire thing. Like, he got everything out of Gardner Minshew. You would kind of have to see that from Daniel Jones if something happens to Anthony again. If you leave the season feeling good about Shane and Anthony has failed or got hurt or whatever, I don't think you have to move on from Shane. And then with Ballard, I think generally we all like what he's done this offseason. We like that he went out and addressed the secondary with aggressive moves. If those moves pan out, if some of those draft picks from recently pan out, I think you feel okay about him. But if some of these risks that we've mentioned, or like areas where there clearly needs to be depth that there isn't, if the same old thing happens where we've been yelling at them all year and then it comes back to bite them, then it gets kind of tricky, because again, your handprints are literally all over the failure of the team and the demise of them and what went wrong. So I like Anthony, Shane, Chris Ballard are probably the 3 topics I get asked about the most. And so I think it could really go either way, but I don't necessarily think they have to be one package deal.
Yeah, I will say, at least in regards to like just the vibes, I guess, with the team, is if those two felt completely tied to Anthony Richardson and nothing else, you're not spending $14 million on Daniel Jones. They essentially lost a 5th-round comp pick doing that, and they're talking about some open competition going into camp. Even if that is all window dressing and just, saying it to say it this offseason, you don't do that if your job is tied to Anthony Richardson. Their job is tied to success on the field this season. That's why they brought in Daniel Jones this season, to have a fallback plan, which is fine, if you're trying to save your job there. So yeah, they're more so tied to the success of the team this year, which is why they grabbed Anthony Richardson. And aside from Anthony Richardson, when we're looking at success with this roster, I do like what you mentioned there about those additions that Ballard made. They need to pan out. But just looking at it more from a macro standpoint on offense and defense, on offense, there needs to be some kind of identity in terms of running the football and being effective in the red zone, and just more consistency overall. They were so volatile last year on offense, regardless of who the quarterback was. You had long stretches of just nothing, and then long stretches of being this like pretty good offense. Like, what offense are you going to be this year? And then defense, it's kind of the same thing, like establish an identity, really morph into this Lou Anarumo system. Like, I'm not saying success is right from the gate, week 1, they're a top 10 defense, because it's going to take time. The first month or so of the season is probably going to be a struggle for this defense, because this is such a different defense than any of these guys have really played in before. But by the end of the season, really finding their groove and becoming Lou Anarumo style of defense for the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, I think that's a successful season for the defense. And I think it would lead to them maybe being a playoff team if all things go right on offense. So I'm with you. I don't think success necessarily means playoffs, but it's got to be closer than last year. It certainly has to be closer than last year. And I will say this, at least with the Colts, is aside from the 2022 season, no matter how bad things have gone, they've always been kind of close to making the playoffs. They've always won more games than the bottom feeders most seasons. So look, as long as most things go right for them, even if the quarterback position's a mess, they'll probably still be in the conversation for the playoffs, because they do know how to win some ugly games and squeak out some wins. So it's all about just doing that enough times to maybe make the playoffs this year.
Yep, I agree. I will say the AFC South is a lot tougher this year, so you really don't know how it can go. The Titans maybe have their quarterback finally. I'm probably not too bullish on the Texans, just because, again, until you get an offensive line that you can look at and trust, I don't know how much I believe it. And then the Jaguars, they're good for at least one win against the Colts per year. So, they got healthy Trevor Lawrence back. So, yeah, that division obviously dictates a lot about the outcome of the Colts season. So we'll see. I think the division in general got a little bit better, but the Colts hopefully got a little better. I mean, they lost a lot, but the additions they made should be pretty impactful, I would think.
Yeah, no, I think just adding Ward and Bynum and Lou Anarumo and Tyler Warren, I think it does raise the floor of this Colts team if they stay healthy. And that is ultimately the biggest thing. So
Yeah.
we will certainly see with this Colts team going forward. We have a lot to cover on this specific topic the rest of the offseason. But don't worry, you guys get us for 5 episodes a week throughout May and throughout most of the offseason. So we'll have plenty of time to digest and talk about our expectations for this team, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, even doing some summer scouting reports on some of these players for you guys. So thank you as always for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now for your next listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at ZachX2, all on socials. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.